Colossians chapter 4 is going to be our sermon text. I love this time of year, not just because we change gifts and throw forth like that, and others, some that do that, and others that don't, but because a lot of people's minds are now shifted towards Jesus, in particularly, and they would not necessarily be so. So I try to take it as an opportunity to teach to them the whole counsel of Jesus. And so, yes, you think about Jesus, and you think about how he was born. But more so than Jesus being born, his life that he lived. In every facet, Jesus left for you and I an example of how to live. One of the things in my reading and my studies that I was coming across is this passage right here. And when you think about Jesus and the way he answered every man, which is our topic, even when they were slapping him and spitting on him and handling him in a way that you and I would probably lose our cool, he still handled himself in a way that was above reproach, all right, as that which would please the Father. So our subject, how to answer every man, and you could see sometimes we're like this old bird right here when we answer someone. Let's see what we're going to talk about. Obviously, we want to understand the context, and this is key. When we get to Colossians chapter 4, we need to understand the context and why he's writing what he's writing. Number two, to know, that's two twos, to know how we must answer every man regardless of the circumstance. You don't get the right, I don't get the right, we don't have the reprieve when someone does this to get to take off, so to speak, our halo and give them a piece of our mind. When someone, say, disrespects you in that sense and does not even treat you with the same common courtesy as they would someone else, you don't get to blow your cool and do that. That's not how we should respond as children of God, and we're going to show that from the text. Number three, we want to give examples of speech that is well-pleasing to God amidst various circumstances. Amidst various circumstances. It's easy to be polite to everyone when everybody's being polite to you. But when somebody's stepping on your toe, when somebody's put their finger at your nose, hello, then it becomes difficult to give that godly response, all right? So let's get Colossians chapter 4, and let's do a little reading of this. Mind you, Paul is in prison in this letter. It's one of his prison epistles. But we'll start at verse 1, but the last couple verses, 6 and 7, is where we're going to hinge on. Verse 1 says, Masters, treat your slaves justly and fairly, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. Continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray also for us, that God may open to us a door of opportunity, or a door for the word, to declare the mystery of Christ, on account which I am in prison. Mystery there means that which is folded, which is now unfolded. In other words, the gospel. Verse 4, that I may make it clear, which is how I ought to what? Speak. Which is how I ought to speak. Watch where he says, these two verses are our text. Walk in wisdom toward outsiders. In other words, those who are not Christians. Making the best use of the time, or redeeming the time, all right? Because you don't know if tomorrow's going to be here. Verse 6, our text. Let your speech always, in every occasion, in every circumstance, be gracious. Seasoned with what? Salt. You know, you ever just eat bland eggs? It's disgusting. But if you put some salt and pepper on it, hello. Right. Seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer every person. Now let's get the context of what Paul is saying here. Some people resented Christians and were unkind to them in this context. The Christians were called atheists because they served no visible gods. You see that? And now, let's look at the next one. They're viewed as unpatriotic, the Christians, because they did not burn incense before the image of the emperor. Now, the Christians are trying to live in this environment, and you're trying to respond to people, and they are really resented. They're viewed as atheists, and they're viewed as unpatriotic because they don't do what everybody else is doing. But you still got to respond in a way that's pleasing to God. You don't get the reprieve not to do it. Also, they're viewed as immoral, lacking morality. Because of necessity, they would often meet behind locked doors. You don't meet like everybody else. You don't do like everybody else does. And you meet behind these locked doors, and you must be doing something that's wrong. So you're viewed as immoral. And so what Paul is saying, he says, walk in wisdom towards outsiders. Handle yourself in a certain way towards those that are outsiders, those that are not Christians. But, beloved, you have to do the same thing even with those that are your brothers and sisters, all right? Because we're not all there at the same place. We're always adding to our faith. So walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of time. Sometimes we hang up on things and spend a lot of time on things and which are really not wise to do. You got to know when to shake the dust off your feet, so to speak, and continue to pray and no doubt desire their best. But Jesus even says it, if they don't receive you or if they shake the dust off your feet. Then he goes on to say, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt. So we're going to go over these verses quick, and I'll give some examples. And Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, verse 11 through 12 says, blessed are you when others revile. That means they hurl abuse. They revile you, and they persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely. On whose account? There is Christ's account, all right? So if we suffer as a Christian, we rejoice in that matter. Verse 12 says, rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So Paul is trying to make sure, listen, the way in which we respond to those who are on the outside in regards to our faith makes all the difference in whether or not we ever have a chance to convert them. Right? That same principle holds true to your peers, to your wife, to your associates, to your children. It's the same thing. If you render the same thing that they render unto you, how are you or I any different? Do you see that? And so that's the point in which we're trying to see, and we're trying to make sure we understand this context of what Paul is saying, all right? Now, he says, conduct yourselves, and basically as a Christian, conduct yourselves with wisdom toward outsiders. That's how the New American Standard Bible says. Conduct yourselves wisely, the New Revised Standard Version says. Conduct yourself wisely or with wisdom. The New International Version says, be wise in the way you act toward outsiders and make the most of every opportunity. And the King James Version says, walk in wisdom. He's not literally saying walk like that, physically walk, but the idea is your deportment, your conduct. Conduct yourself. That's the idea right there. Conduct yourselves with wisdom. That's what it literally means, all right? Conduct yourselves. Be wise in the way. Wisdom is putting knowledge into use, all right? You have knowledge and you apply it. That makes you wise, okay? Wisdom, knowledge and action, if you will, all right? James says, if any man lack wisdom, let him do what? Ask of God who gives to all men liberally, all right? Conduct yourselves or walk in wisdom. Walk in wisdom, that is, conduct yourselves uprightly and honestly. Deal with them, i.e. non-Christians, with the strictest principles of integrity so that they, Christians, may not have occasion to reproach the religion which you profess. What did Pilate marvel at with Jesus when he was before him? He marveled that he said what? Nothing. Sometimes the best response is nothing. You don't have to respond to everything every time somebody says something. You can just be quiet and just, that's the best response, all right? Conduct yourselves uprightly and honesty, all right? That's going back to chapter 1, verse 5 through 10, and he really deals with that. I really got to deal with that passage real quick. How are we doing on time? Are we doing great? That clock's broke. I'm joking. Okay, now I'm going to deal with chapter 1 real quick because I'm doing really good on my time. He says, verse 3, we always thank God again when we pray, basically because they obeyed the gospel, and he's thankful that they're faithful Does that make sense? And you get to verse 5, Paul says, because of the hope, that is the confident expectation laid up for you in heaven, of this you have heard before in the word of truth, the gospel, which has come to you as indeed in the whole world, and is bearing fruit and growing, as it also does among you, since the day you heard it and understood it, the grace of God in truth, just as you learned it from Epaphras, our beloved fellow servant or faithful minister. So Epaphras is the one who taught the Corinthians the gospel. He's their minister. He is a faithful minister of Christ on your behalf, and has made known to us your love in the Spirit. Verse 9. And so from the day we heard, we do not cease to pray, have not ceased to pray for you, asking that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all spiritual wisdom, watch it, and understanding, verse 10, for what purpose? So as to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, doing what? Fully pleasing him. What else? Bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. All right. And so, again, we conduct ourselves, and Paul is praying that they behave in such a way and have this and grow in their faith. All right. So we walk in a manner worthy, live a life worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to him, bearing fruit in every good work, increasing in the knowledge of God. Again, not just when it's easy and when everything is nice and people are being palatable, but even in those difficult, dark moments. And Christ is our example. All right, speech or conversation, and that word, we're just doing 5 and 6. We're just going verse by verse. That your speech literally means your words, all right, your conversation, all right. Let your speech, your conversation be always, all right. So the way in which we talk and the way in which we answer every man, regardless of the circumstance. Are you following me? All right, this is the easy part. Then we're going to get to where the rubber meets the road in a second. Let your speech always be how? Gracious, seasoned with salt. All right, so you think about that idea of gracious. My conversation, the way in which I talk, should reflect that I have been saved by grace, Ephesians 2:8. All right, my conversation, even when I'm wronged, I still should respond in the same loving, merciful way, because I know that if I, the person that is not merciful, judgment will be without mercy to that person. So I know I have to be merciful and gracious in my judgment. And so the way in which I communicate to my children, the Bible says in Ephesians 6, fathers, provoke not your what? Children unto wrath. Sometimes we provoke our children's fathers by the way in which we're stern. It's the tone in which we might communicate. Sometimes we make it difficult, mothers, for our daughters and the way that which we deal with them. All right? I was having this conversation with someone yesterday, literally, and I said, you can't handle him like that no more. He's not the same person. He's older. And if you think that, yes, you can physically put your hand on him and make this do this, but that doesn't mean you're going to get the response that you want. Sometimes being wise knows when I got to make adjustment into how I deal and handle this person, because no two people are the exact same way. All right. Now I would get a whooping and I would rather a whooping than be grounded. For me not to be able to go outside and play, which is anathema to these children today. But anyhow, but for me to not be able to go outside and play or fish or hunt and do something like that, it's the worst thing ever. Like, why do you hate me? What did I do to make you hate me so much, right? I just take the whooping and I'm sorry, and that's it. So you got to know which way to respond, and things change over time, all right? Let your speech be always with grace, all right? Cherish. The idea of love, all right? Seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer every man. Let your speech always be gracious. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so you can answer every person, each person. All right, so a gracious speech, all right, Ephesians 2:8, he must have tasteful speech and to speak graciously in appealing and a pleasant style. We must speak as those who have been saved by the grace of God. Ephesians 4:15, but speaking the truth in what? Love. Sometimes we're nicer to people in our speech that are not our family than we are to our own family and friends. Well, we'll be honest. You know you got them siblings, sometimes you feel you can talk to your siblings just any kind of way until they start to try to handle up on you. Hamburger. I got a different family. I don't know about y'all. But but you know what I mean? We got to speak to everyone. Everyone, doesn't matter. Speaking the truth in love. Watch it. We're to grow up in all aspects of him who is ahead, even Christ. Ephesians 4:29, let no unwholesome word. Don't be cursing. You'd be surprised how many Christians have potty mouths. Oh, man, we may well deal with it. I don't think I'm going to get to all this lesson. It's the truth. We get upset, and then sometimes you curse them out in your mind. You don't let them come out. You don't let that word come out, but in your mind, you calling them everything. And I had to tell this to my kids. Just because you didn't say a 4-letter word, a 5-letter word, a 6-letter word, whatever letter word it is, don't mean you ain't cursing. Don't mean it. Sometimes the way we call people, you stupid. Really, bro? A soft answer turns the way around. I'm like, hey. And so what I have to do is, because, siblings get to going, I say, I made the other ones the other day. I said, you stand right here and you stand right here, and y'all going to say positive things about each other till I get tired of hearing it. I just let them sit up there and go. Because you get tired of all that stuff. I said, man, we can tear each other down, and we great at that. Ain't we great at finding people's faults? Yes, and pointing it out instead of taking something and building them up. And I just got about sick of it. And I said, I can tell that now because they're not here. They with their grandma. But if they was here, I wouldn't tell y'all that. But anyway, and I'm going to edit this out too. but anyways, I had to make it. I said, come on now. This stuff ain't right. Y'all got to build each other up. I got tired of hearing it, Anyway, I was sounding like my mama. Let no unwholesome word, corrupting talk, proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, building up. How often do we build up each other? Hey, man, we need to build each other up. There's enough people that's going to knock you down and criticize you. And I'm not saying that you can't have constructive criticism. I'm not saying you can't make things like that, but we got to be a people that build each other up. Hey, man, you know what? Whatever it is, you did this good. You did this good. Find something positive to say. We have to have gracious speech. Gracious speech. Women, you want to make your man run through a wall? Make him feel like a man. Boy, you sure cut that grass. Peacock proud up in that camp. Yeah, he is. You did good smoking that brisket. Well, I kind of thought I burned it, but no, that char's good. Oh, thank you, baby. Build them up. Build them up. Build them up. Men the same way. We got to do the same thing with our wives. Girl, you show, hey, them biscuits, they a little burnt. No, baby, I'll just put a little extra honey on it. A little extra butter and make it soft. It'll work. Our speech is to be seasoned with salt. So God expects us to have a tasteful, tactful, winsome, and acceptable flavor as though seasoned with salt. As though seasoned with salt. You ever add Tony Chachere's to chicken Alfredo? Yeah, baby. It is good. It is good. It is good. It adds a whole nother dynamic to it when you do it. Seasoned with salt. That's how our speech is. That's how our speech is. I want you to think about this before I get to Jesus. Remember how Jesus was with Peter? Jesus told Peter, Simon, Satan desires to sift thee as wheat. But I've what? I've prayed for you. That what? Your faith may fail you not. Think about it again with Jesus with Peter. Peter has forsaken the Lord. He has denied the Lord. He started even cursing. Peter has gone back to his natural profession of fishing and casting the nets. And when Jesus sees him, he has breakfast ready for him, and he encourages him. Come on, man. That's his speech. At certain times, you rebuke. At certain times, you reprove. Rebuke is the idea of taking off the gloves. But everything you do it with love. Our speech is not to have harsh or cursing, lying, or hateful speech. That one person that you just always get on your nerve and you have that hatefulness almost to them. That's not the way we conduct ourselves as Christians. Now, let's get a little food for thought here for a second, then we're going to turn to our Bibles and we're going to do a lot of reading. Our body language is just that, a language in which we communicate. You might not say any words, but your body language says a whole lot. I look at every last one of you. Okay, I see every last one of you. And I read body language just like you read languages. All of us, you fine, sister. Don't you worry about that. I'm sorry. You good. I still love you. You cook good, and I'm always love you. But anyways, we all understand body language. When our kids roll their eyes at us, what they saying? They ready to die. That's what they saying. They ready to meet their maker when they roll their eyes. That's what they telling me. I don't know what they telling you. When they roll their eyes at me, I'm like, well, let's go ahead and get the insurance policy ready. But anyways, they let me know that they ain't, the girls will do it too. Them girls will do it. But anyways, they're communicating with me that they upset about something, right? But they didn't say anything. And I said, baby girl, you didn't have to say nothing. You just spoke volumes, though. And it's the way. So we got to make sure we watch our language, our body. Again, when we roll our eyes before we ever spoke, you can tell. All right, when we fail to make eye contact, it shows we're really not engaged. Think about it. Your person that you're really trying to communicate to, I'm trying to talk to you, brother, and you all over here on your phone like, did they drop that off already? See that? In every way in which we communicate, we should be engaging, all right? Here's another one, and I have to work on this, all right? We're going to get to our text in a minute, but this knowing how to answer every man does not mean we interrupt them doing every sentence they try and complete, Being a good communicator, this is just communication skills. We're going to get right back there, but Jesus was a good listener. Every man be slow to what? Speak. Quick to what? Listen. Man, I had a bad habit. Probably still do, but I've been working on it for years now. Because you think what you have to say is just so good, because in your mind, everything you say is brilliant, right? If you don't think that about yourself, I don't know. But most of us think that when we have something to say, it's important, or else you would not say it, right? And so sometimes it's and being and having seasoned our communication, our conversation, and knowing how to respond to every person is letting them get out everything they need to get out. I had a person deal with me one time. I was very upset with them. We're having a conversation on the phone, and he was taking down notes. And I realized after about 10 minutes of my ranting, he didn't interrupt me one time. And I just paused for a second. He said, you got it all out? And I said, yeah. He said, okay, good. He said, well, I've been taking notes, and I want to respond to each one of these right here. He took my tone from at a 10 all the way down like this, because he did not interrupt me, which agitates you even more, right? And then number 2, he had a soft answer. A soft answer turns away what? Wrath. Strong answer provokes it. What are we talking about? Learning how to answer every man. All right? Here's another thing, food for thought. Take this with a grain of salt. Instead of making the conversation about yourself or relating everything back to yourself, ask others about themselves. Relate the conversation back to something spiritual. What are we trying to do? Learn how to answer every man. Remember, they're hostile towards them. They view them as unpatriotic, as atheists. They view them as immoral because they do all these things. And I'm trying to reverse the tides so that I can have an opportunity to plant a seed, Luke 8:11, which is the gospel. And I do that by knowing how to be able to answer every man. Jesus is called the master teacher for a reason, all right? Remember they said this to Jesus? He says, answer me this. The baptism of John, from whence it comes. Remember, they asked him this. He responded back by answering them that, all right? So we can consider Jesus, write down these passages, because we're not going to be able to get to all these passages, but write down Luke 22, verse 47 through 53. Remember how he's being mocked. He's got a robe of purple. He's got a crown of thorns and all of these things right here. But he still doesn't revile them. He still doesn't hurl abuse back at them. He still doesn't strike them. And then Matthew 27, verse 11 through 14, he's silent. He's absolutely silent. So we can consider Jesus, all right, as our example. Now, let's get into the Old Testament, if you will. Daniel chapter 2. Jesus, no doubt, is the master teacher and our example. But I want to show that from a youth, that we can learn certain things and we can do it, all right? Daniel chapter number 2. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and then the book of Daniel. Daniel is now in exile. They're in Babylonian captivity. All right. Let's look at Daniel chapter number 2. I guess I need to put it on the screen, huh? Daniel chapter 2, and I said verse 1 through 16, but for time's sake, I'm going to just start at about verse number, well, we start at verse 1. I'll just read. I'll tell you the context. King Nebuchadnezzar is the king. He has a dream. He has all these wise men or magi or sorcerers, if you will, to try to answer him, and they can't do it, all right? So let's look at verse 2. The king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerer, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dream. So they came in and stood before the king, and the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever, tell your servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. Tell us what you dreamed, and we'll make up something is basically what's happening. You following me? All right. Verse 5, the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So we got two things, boy. You know, it's going to get rough. Okay. Therefore, show me the dream and its interpretation. They answered a second time and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show its interpretation. The king answered and said, I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see that the word from me is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you. And we know what that is. You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the time change. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me its interpretation. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demand, for no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. Verse 12. Because of this, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. Kill them. Following me? Verse 13. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed, and they sought Daniel. Remember Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? They sought Daniel and his companions to kill him. Finna get rough for Daniel too, is it not? Then Daniel replied or responded with what? Prudence and discretion, to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree of the king so urgent? And Arioch made the matters known to Daniel, and then Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time. Now watch this. Watch. We're talking about how to respond. Daniel, the King James says, Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom. What are we talking about? How to respond in every situation, in every matter, with wisdom, with wisely, with conduct. Daniel answered with counsel and with wisdom. The NIV says when Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and what? Tact. Wisdom and tact. Sometimes we mouth off at people. And, you know, you see this sadly on the news and stuff like that. A person mouthed off to the police officer. Buddy, he the one that's got the gun. You staring down the barrel, but you still hear hot mouth. That's not going to end well. It's not going to end well. You see that? We have to learn how to respond with wisdom and tact, with counsel and with wisdom, with prudence and discretion. Think about this. They're trying to kill Daniel, man. And this is what Daniel falls in that group. Daniel don't say, man, you did that. No. Well, why is the king so angry? He was able, by his response with wisdom and counsel and tact and discretion or prudence, to be able to gain time, to go and pray and ultimately save their lives. You see that? By the way in which he responded. All right, last one we're going to consider. Let's get Job. Job chapter 32. Job chapter 32. Here's a young man by the name of Elihu. So you have Job, Psalms, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. Wisdom writing or poetic writing, if you will. So Job, many of us know the story or the history of Job, but it goes like this. Job loses all his physical things, does he not? And then he loses all his health and things like that in his family. And he's struck with sore boils and afflictions and various things like that. He's so distressed that he takes broken pottery and he has to cleanse himself with it. He stinks, his breath. All of this stuff is bad that the Lord has allowed him to be struck. But Job does not know that God is really doing what? Putting him to the test. He doesn't know the end, but God already knows the end and how he was going to give him even more, okay? He doesn't know that. Job wants to be answered. Job wants to be vindicated, and his friends are insisting that he did something what? Wrong. You did this wrong. You did this wrong. You did this wrong. You did this wrong. Not everybody that suffers has done something wrong. Sometimes innocent people suffer. It happens, right? And so Elihu is a young man, all right? Let's start at verse 1. And he has his three friends there, and they have all these various sections of speech. It's how the book is written down to. And finally, God from heaven speaks. But before that, Elihu, the young man. So chapter 32, verse 1. So these three men ceased to answer Job because he was righteous in his what? Own eyes. Then Elihu, the son of Barashel, the Buzite of the family of Ram, burned with anger. He burned with anger at Job because he justified himself rather than God. He burned with anger also at Job's three friends because they had found no answer, although they had declared Job to be in the wrong. Now Elihu, watch it, Elihu had waited to what? Speak to Job because they were older than he. Listen, young people. Listen, middle-aged people. We got to learn sometimes to hold our speech. Sometimes we put our mouth in gear before we put our brain in gear, and we let our mouth speak everything. That's just the truth. Sometimes we flat out disrespectful to older people, and that shouldn't be so. That just not should be so. So this young man waited to speak even though he was angry. What are we talking about? Learning how to answer every man, having our speech seasoned with salt, answering graciously, all right? And so we see an example of him, even though he's angry, he had waited to speak to Job because they were older than he. He had respect for them. And when Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of these three men, he burned with anger. And Elihu, the son of Barashel, the Buzite, answered and said, I am young in years, and you are aged. Therefore, I was timid and afraid to declare my opinion to you. You see how he's handling them? I hope you see it. He's handling them. He knows full and well he's right. But I'm still going to handle you like this because there's a better way to do certain things. Wisdom is not necessarily predicated on age. If any man lack wisdom, let him ask who? God. Where's wisdom found? In the Holy Writ, by applying yourself to it. All right? And so he knows good and well, but he's doing the right things so he can have a better chance of them hearing them and receiving them. Do you see that? The end goal is for the person to receive what it is that you're saying and respond in the way in which you know is best, based off your study of the scriptures. He said, therefore I was timid and afraid to declare to you my opinion to you. I said, let days speak. In other words, let the aged men speak, and many years teach wisdom. But it is the spirit in man, the breath of the Almighty, that makes him understand. It is not the old who are wise. It is not literally not those who have many years who are wise, nor the aged who understand what is right. Therefore I say, listen to me. Let me also declare my opinion. Behold, I waited for your words. I listened for your wise sayings while you searched out what to say. I gave you my attention, and behold, there was none among you who refuted Job or who answered his words. Beware lest you say, we have found wisdom. God may vanquish him, not a man. He has not directed his words against me, that I will not answer him with your speeches. They are dismayed. They answer no more. They have not a word to say. So let's look at it. This is Job. We got a couple more passages of him. Elihu waited to speak, all right? Now let's look at chapter 33. Flip the page over, and let's finish this lesson out. I want to show you, Elihu's going to speak for the next couple of chapters, but look at chapter 33, verse 1. Look how Elihu responds with Job. But now hear my speech, O Job, and listen to all my words. Behold, I open my mouth, and the tongue in my mouth speaks. My word declare the uprightness of my heart, and what my lips know, they speak sincerely. The Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life. Answer me if you can. Set your words in order before me. Take your stand. Behold, I am toward God as you are. I too was pinched off from a piece of clay. Behold, no fear of me need terrify you. My pressure will not be heavy upon you. Surely you have spoken in my ears, and I have heard the sound of your words. You say, I am pure without transgression. I am clean, and there is no iniquity in me. Behold, he finds occasion against me. He counts me. So he keeps going on, and he's go to the next chapter, chapter 34. All right. Now he's going to deal with these men, if you will, the other ones. Chapter 34. Hear my words, you wise men, and give ear to me, you who hear. Notice what he calls them. Wise men. So all along the way, I'm trying to do this right here to help you out to see this right here. I cannot make this point any plainer. If you want wisdom, you're going to have to seek it from the book. All right? And so if you want this, so if I'm not really, if let's apply this to our, let's make application and apply it to our lives. If I'm going throughout my life, and whatever decision I'm set to make, if I'm not praying about it, if I'm not meditating about it, if I'm not asking wisdom, I'm not seeking counsel and stuff like this, sometimes you pray, but then you say, Lord, help me, guide me in this particular direction. And then you're like, you know what I need to go do? I need to go ask such and such a person. Let me go advise and counsel with this person who's older. Let me go see if this person has been in this situation. Let me go do that. By the way, Titus 2 says the older people are to do what? Teach the younger people, right? And that's where wisdom is transferred, all right? So anyways, it's the same thing in chapter 34. All right, so let's consider Elihu. Though he is younger than the other men, he is still able to reason with them, and he does not speak out of turn. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 1 and 2, rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as a what? Father. Rebuke not an older man, literally. All right. Rebuke, take off the gloves, and let's get it 10 and 2. You guard your chin. You know what boxing is, right? But rebuke is that idea. That's what you don't do. You put on the gloves and you make sure they're heavily padded and you deliver soft blows. It's the easiest way I can teach it. Rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as a father, and the younger men as brethren, the elder women as mothers, the younger as sisters with all purity. Sometimes young people, our problem is the older people can't tell us nothing. We just now getting to raise kids. They done raised 4 generations. I don't know if any of y'all that oldest raised 4 generations. Maybe that's a stretch. Let's just say 2 generations. How about 1 generation, okay? I don't want to offend nobody with age. But anyways, that'll be edited out too. But anyways, they done raised stuff like this, but they don't know nothing. They just old and ancient. But yet and still, we are the products of them, and we have our right faculties and doing pretty decent, right? So we need to make sure that we listen to them, all right? 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12, let no man despise your what? Youth. But be thou an example of the believers in word and conversation and charity and spirit and faith and in purity. Let no man despise thy youth. It's because you're young, you can't do this. A lot of times we make mistakes because the elderly people can make mistakes because they don't want to listen to nobody else. They get to the point where I know everything else and he's just young and dumb. That's not a wise sentiment. It's not wise. It's not wise at all. I remember vividly times asking my old mentor when he was living questions about certain things. And only to come back to say, that was a good thing. I never even thought about it like that. Let me go back and study. And he was like, you know what? This is just something we always regurgitated. But upon further inspection, this is actually right. How do you think that made me feel? That I'm not some dummy to ask him questions. And then what was he doing? He was showing me an example that in his 70s, I can still learn even though I've been preaching for 30 years. But sometimes, can't nobody tell me nothing. I know everything. Can't nobody tell me nothing. I'm right. And that's not the right attitude. Listen, I hope, trust, and pray that I've said something to encourage all of us and to remind us how to answer every man and ultimately to consider Jesus as the ultimate example for everything. A lot of times right now we're going to be with family, and you know what they say, seldom visit, make long-term friends. And so sometimes you get with your family members and somebody bring up something and you might be tempted to, you know what I mean? Hello. And so I pray that we think on these, not just today, but throughout our daily life and try to be better and be ready to give offense and answer for everything that we believe and why we do what we do. The gospel is easy, it's simple, it's a great thing. Jesus came to this earth. He lived a sinless life. He died for our sins. He was buried, conquering the grave, and he's resurrected. And we too, when we believe that message, when we're buried in that watery grave of baptism, we rise in newness of life, a new creation, all things pass away. Behold, all things become new. If you need the prayers of the church, whatever way we can help, baptism, we give you that opportunity.